So I actually ended up using an iPhone 6 as pretty much my business phone for a day, which was very, very interesting. Before, I've been using the iPhone 6 for a very long period of time, and I actually was using the iPhone 6 Plus as my main device for a little bit of time, I guess back in 2016, and I had a pretty good time with it. But now with the iPhone 6, a few things, honestly, I kind of already knew what I was expecting with this phone. I pretty much did everything I would do in a normal day, but phone calls and texting, I didn't put my iMessage account here, but I did try using like Snapchat and Twitter and all these other things too to text back and forth. Other than that, I primarily use this phone. And like I said before, I've been using the iPhone 6 for a long period of time. I've compared it to every single iPhone after and before it as well, even in this year. And one thing I would definitely tell you is I've kept it kind of like I guess a release log, not a release log, but just like kind of like a few things that kind of stood out to me. We already kind of knew things like, it's going to be slow. It's not going to be the, best performing iPhone of all time. But there were a few other things that kind of stood out to me as well. Now, the first thing I want to hit on, which you can see all of them here, is that the phone overheats like crazy. What's very strange is even for simple things, like when I was going through the App Store and I was just, kind of scrolling through and I was seeing what apps I can download, I didn't want to, primarily in a day, I pretty much use my MacBook every single thing that I get a chance to. I very rarely even use my phone at all, but I went ahead and just downloaded the random applications I could. I didn't really use too many. You can see the dots next to the application that I just updated and I didn't use. Like I didn't go on TikTok at all. I didn't really go on Facebook at all, but I did go on applications like Snapchat quite a bit. I didn't even go on Instagram, which is crazy. I went on Twitter quite a bit, and I just spent a lot of time on YouTube Studio, Spotify, and then Apollo, which is my Reddit client. And even just when I updated the applications, the phone was overheating like crazy, which was very strange to me. I was not expecting the phone to overheat, but I just came off using the iPhone 6s for a little bit of time too, and that phone was overheating a little bit as well. So it's not anything I haven't felt before, but it was very, very strange. Another thing was actually with the getting things to actually load in the first place. To even get certain things to load, like for example, if I load up the camera, it takes a lot more bigger of a noticeable time than some other phones, which is expected, but it is actually a pretty big difference. For example, if I go and get into my clock, even getting into something like that just takes a noticeable amount of time, especially within games like Temple Run. Now, Temple Run, I love this game a lot. I played it a little bit on this phone, and it just takes a very long amount of time, especially if you've never played it here before, and it was a very choppy experience. So I go and play this game, it was way choppier than what I was expecting. The iPhone 6s is a much faster phone than this one is, and it's crazy that this one was pretty much glitching up that much. It's actually pretty insane to me. So in that standpoint, from a 6 to a 6s, it was actually a pretty big jump in terms of performance. Another case, if we go and get into something like, if we just load up like TikTok, for example, I haven't loaded this one up yet, it takes a longer amount of time than you would ever expect. So I definitely do think with these types of applications, if you're trying to use a phone on an everyday basis, these seconds and seconds and seconds like it takes to load up these things is probably going to annoy the average person. So that's probably something to keep in mind. Another thing is that this iPhone version is stuck on iOS 12. There's no iOS 13, 14, 15 updates on this thing. Unlike with the iPhone 6s, we got, many more versions of software. So because of that, we are stuck on a fairly limited version of iOS. It still is fairly current, like it doesn't look super outdated. The big thing I didn't like was widgets. I wish we had widgets here. We don't have the, widget panel on the side here too, so that was something that kind of stood out to me. But for the most part, for everything else that I kind of did with this phone in terms of just feature-wise on iOS, I didn't really feel like I was missing out on too much. So I kind of think that's one thing to keep in mind. You're really not going to feel like you have like a completely outdated phone, mostly because iOS is still kind of, stuck in this weird phase where it needs to improve the UI, but they haven't really done it yet. So that's probably another thing to keep in mind. Another thing, and this was a really, really big one. Whenever I went ahead and tried to update certain applications, they didn't actually go ahead and allow me to update to the most current version of the application. A lot of them made me get, the iOS 13.4 update or the iOS 14 update, I think, as well. So if you're trying to go, and what this means is basically, if there's, I can't basically download the latest version of most of these applications. And I think this includes Snapchat, Instagram, and a few other ones. Like, for example, if I go and update Facebook, I think there might be a pop-up. As you can see, it says download an old version of this app. So I can't even, and it says iOS 13.4, I can't even download the latest version of these, applications anymore, which is very strange. So I have to go and download this older one, and I keep getting into this pop-up where it doesn't allow me to download. Just keep saying that, and I have to cancel it, and then it stops. So I can't even download all these applications here that say update. I cannot download the latest version, which is so strange. I'm actually very sad about that. So this one allows me to do it. Let's see this one. So as you can see, not every single one. So I wish that wasn't the case, but when you have an old phone like this, that's kind of what's expected. Now, one thing that was actually kind of good with this phone was actually with the battery life. I was not expecting the battery life on this phone to be as decent as it was. Now, iOS 12 was historically pretty decent, but like I said before, I just came from my iPhone 6S. And with the 6S, this phone, I mean, the battery life was just, not only was the battery life really bad, but the problem is that this phone's battery life just depletes like crazy. It'll just go from like 100% down to 80% in like 1 second, and then it'll go from 80% to like 76% in like another second. Like it just goes down and it's like, and then it'll go up a little bit if you turn it on. Like it's not calibrated properly. With the iPhone 6, this battery life is still actually fairly high. If we go to my battery here, you can see my battery health is actually at 98%, which is way higher than I thought. My iPhone 6S is like probably 70% or something. So that's probably why the battery life is going like that. But this phone, I mean, I treated it kind of the same. I mean, I did, but I do think I bought the 6S with a little bit worse battery life here too. But that was another crazy thing that kind of stood out to me as well. And I will say for this phone being a 2014 phone, about 8 years later, I don't think this is a bad phone. Like I think this thing actually held up fairly decently well. Now, would this be a phone I would recommend buying? Absolutely not. If you're not planning on using this as a side phone, like I could use this as a side phone, no problem. But there are still some security risks that come with this phone. The first thing being, it's on an outdated version of iOS, meaning this thing isn't really supported anymore with software. As you can see, iOS 12 point whatever it was, 12.5.5 was the last version of software this thing got. And this was years ago. Like this was not yesterday. This was quite a bit of time ago. So when you have a device like this that's pretty much giving you this type of software, at this day and age, it really isn't the best performing phone at that point, in my opinion. Now, I think it's still like, a good phone in terms of the things it brought at the time, but it really is a very outdated phone. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But I think the biggest problem, and this is the thing that kind of is standing out to me the most, is the application support. There are a lot of applications that aren't supported on this version of software. So let's say Instagram brought this really cool feature on, the new thing you can do or whatever. Well, you're not going to be able to utilize those features anymore because you can't download and install that latest version of software. Now, there may be some workarounds in the future, but for any application update in the future, like with TikTok or any other application, you won't actually be able to go ahead and utilize those specific features because you can't update to those, specific versions of software. So that is the one thing that kind of stood out to me the most. I don't think, like I said before, it's like a deal breaker, like a life-changing thing. But if you're okay with rocking an old phone that may have very limited features, but it's still pretty decent, like it shocked me more. I would not usually recommend an iPhone 6, and I still would not recommend it. But if you need some sort of backup phone, or you need a phone for like whatever, like a little kid or something, then maybe this is a okay phone if you can buy it for like $50. But other than that, I still think an iPhone 6S is a better phone overall, just because you are getting, a phone that's still kind of somewhat supported. So that kind of covers it up. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that helps me so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.